The plane lurched violently, a sickening drop that sucked the air from Ezra's lungs. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the tray table as screams erupted around him. At 25,000 feet, with the cabin shaking and oxygen masks dangling like ghosts, Ezra Carter realized he might die without ever telling the truth. He wasn't supposed to be on this flight. A last-minute work trip to Seattle had thrown him onto United Flight 237, a red-eye from San Francisco. He was 27, a software engineer with a sharp tongue and a sharper mind, always chasing the next big project. His dark hair was perpetually messy, his hazel eyes quick to spark with defiance. But now, as the plane shuddered and the captain's voice crackled with forced calm, none of that mattered. His fingers fumbled for his phone, heart pounding as he typed a message to the one person he'd never had the guts to face, Theo Bennett. Theo, his rival since college, the golden boy of their computer science program at Berkeley. Theo, 28, with his infuriating blonde curls, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could charm a room or cut like a knife. They'd clashed over everything: code, grades, internships, each argument a spark in a fire that never quite died. Ezra hated how Theo always seemed one step ahead, how his easy confidence made Ezra feel small. But worse, he hated how his heart raced every time Theo leaned too close during a debate, or how he'd catch himself staring at Theo's hands as they typed furiously in the lab. The plane tilted again, and Ezra's stomach dropped. His thumbs moved faster than his thoughts. "You blind fool. I've always liked you." He hit send before he could overthink it, the words burning a hole through years of denial. The message flew into the ether as the cabin lights flickered. San Francisco, 6 months earlier. The city buzzed with its usual chaos, cable cars clanging, fog rolling over the bay. Ezra worked at a startup in Soma, coding apps that promised to change the world but mostly just tracked user data. He liked the grind, the late nights fueled by coffee and ambition. But Theo was always there, a shadow in his periphery. Theo had landed a job at a rival company in Silicon Valley, and their paths crossed at every tech conference, every hackathon. Each encounter was a battlefield, their words sharp, their smiles sharper. At a startup mixer in a sleek downtown loft, Ezra spotted Theo across the room, holding court with investors. Theo's navy blazer hugged his frame, his laugh carrying over the hum of conversation. Ezra gripped his beer, hating how his pulse quickened. "Still pretending you're the next Elon Musk?" Ezra called out, striding over. Theo's eyes locked onto him, a familiar smirk curling his lips. "Still chasing my shadow, Carter." The jab landed, but Theo's gaze lingered, something unreadable flickering in it. They sparred for an hour, trading barbs about algorithms and market trends, until Theo leaned in, his voice low. "You're exhausting, Ezra. But you're good. Too good." The compliment stung more than the insults, because it was honest. Ezra didn't know when the rivalry had twisted into something else. Maybe it was the late-night study sessions at Berkeley, when Theo's knee brushed his under the table. Maybe it was the time Theo caught him after a stumble at a campus party, their faces inches apart. But Ezra buried it deep, convinced Theo would never see him as more than a rival. He was too straight, too perfect, too everything Ezra wasn't. Back on the plane, the turbulence eased for a moment, but the tension didn't. Ezra's phone buzzed. A reply from Theo. "What the hell? Ezra, you're on that flight." Another jolt shook the cabin, and Ezra's heart sank. Theo must have seen the news flight 237 was trending, a breaking story about engine failure. Ezra typed back, fingers trembling. "Yeah, bad timing. Huh." The months before the flight had been a slow unraveling. Ezra's life was a treadmill: code, meetings, repeat. He dated, but no one stuck. Every guy he met felt like a pale imitation of Theo's fire. At a tech summit in Oakland, they'd ended up on the same panel, debating AI ethics. Theo argued for regulation. Ezra pushed for innovation. The audience ate it up. But Ezra felt the weight of Theo's gaze, like he was being seen for the first time. Afterward, they grabbed drinks at a dive bar in the Mission District. The neon lights cast shadows on Theo's face, softening his edges. "Why do you always fight me so hard?" Theo asked, swirling his whiskey. Ezra shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Because you make it easy." But his voice cracked, and Theo noticed. He always noticed. "You're not as tough as you think," Theo said, leaning closer. Their knees touched under the table, and Ezra froze, heat flooding his chest. He wanted to say it then, to admit the truth, but fear clamped his mouth shut. Instead, he deflected with a joke and left early, cursing himself all the way home. Now, on the plane, with death looming, Ezra wished he'd been braver. His phone buzzed again. "Theo, where are you seated?" "I'm coming to you." Ezra blinked, confused. Coming to him. Was Theo on the plane too? His heart raced as he typed his seat number. 17B. The realization hit like a second engine failure. Theo was here, on this doomed flight. Ezra craned his neck, scanning the chaotic cabin. Passengers clutched armrests, some praying, others sobbing. Then he saw him, Theo, pushing through the aisle, his face pale but determined. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world steadied. Theo dropped into the empty seat beside him, breathless. "You idiot," Theo said, his voice thick. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Ezra laughed, a shaky sound. "Didn't think we'd need a plane crash for it." Theo's hand found his, their fingers intertwining as the plane groaned. It was a small gesture, but it felt like everything. The captain's voice came again, announcing an emergency landing in Portland. Hope flickered, fragile but real. Ezra looked at Theo, whose eyes were wet but fierce. "If we survive this," Theo said, "we're talking about that text." Ezra nodded, his throat tight. "Deal." The plane's descent was a nightmare of jolts and screams, but Ezra barely noticed. Theo's hand in his anchored him, a lifeline in the chaos. Their fingers stayed locked, knuckles white, as the cabin lights dimmed and the oxygen mask swayed above them. Portland's airport came into view through the window, a patchwork of lights against the dark. The plane hit the runway hard, skidding with a screech that drowned out the passengers' cries. When it finally stopped, applause erupted, ragged and desperate. Ezra exhaled, his body trembling. Theo's grip loosened, but he didn't let go. "We're alive," Theo whispered, like he needed to say it to believe it. They stumbled off the plane, herded into a terminal buzzing with paramedics and reporters. Ezra's legs felt like jelly, but Theo's arm around his shoulder kept him steady. Outside, under the glare of floodlights, Theo pulled him aside. "You meant it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice low, searching. "That text." Ezra's heart pounded harder than it had on the plane. He nodded, unable to meet Theo's eyes. "Yeah, I meant it." Theo's laugh was shaky, almost disbelieving. "You're such a coward, Carter." But there was no venom in it, just a raw edge that made Ezra's chest ache. Before he could respond, Theo pulled him into a hug, fierce and unyielding. Ezra froze, then melted into it, breathing in the scent of Theo's cologne, grounding himself in the warmth of his rival turned something more. The next morning, they were stuck in Portland, the flight grounded for investigation. Ezra and Theo ended up at a diner near the airport, a greasy spoon with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like regret. They sat across from each other, silent at first, the weight of last night's confession hanging between them. Ezra traced the rim of his mug, his mind replaying the crash. The text, Theo's hand in his. "So," Theo started, breaking the silence. "You've liked me since when?" "Berkeley." Ezra's face heated. "Maybe. You were always so. You." It pissed me off. Theo grinned, leaning back. You were no picnic either. Always pushing my buttons. Challenging me. I thought you hated me. I did, Ezra admitted. But not really. It was easier to fight you than to. He stopped. The words too heavy. Theo's eyes softened. Then to what? Say it. Ezra swallowed, forcing the truth out. Then to admit I wanted you. The diner faded away. The clatter of dishes and chatter of strangers irrelevant. Theo reached across the table, his fingers brushing Ezra's wrist. I'm not as blind as you think, he said quietly. I noticed you. Ezra. Always did. The admission hit harder than the plane's landing. Ezra wanted to ask what that meant, to dig into the years of tension. But a news alert buzzed on his phone. The crash was all over X, with shaky videos and passenger accounts flooding the platform. One post caught his eye, a blurry photo of him and Theo in the terminal. Theo's arm around him. Captioned, Rivals or something more. Flight 237-inch, Ezra groaned, shoving his phone at Theo. Great. We're viral. Theo laughed, scrolling through the comments. They're not wrong. He looked up, his gaze steady. So what now? They spent the day in Portland, wandering the city to kill time before their replacement flight. The air was crisp, the streets lined with quirky shops and food carts. Ezra felt exposed, like the crash had stripped away his defenses. Theo, usually so polished, seemed raw too, his jokes softer, his glances longer. They walked along the Willamette River, the water reflecting the gray sky. Theo stopped at a bench, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. Back at Berkeley, Theo said, staring at the river. I thought you were just competitive. But there was this one night. At the library. You were stuck on some code, and I helped you debug it. You smiled at me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Ezra's breath caught. He remembered that night, the way Theo's patience had disarmed him. Why didn't you say anything? Theo shrugged, a sad smile tugging at his lips. Same reason you didn't. Fear. Pride. Pick one. The honesty was a knife, cutting through years of pretense. Ezra wanted to kiss him right there, but doubt crept in. What if this was just adrenaline, a fluke born from surviving? He stood, shoving his hands in his pockets. We should head back. Flight's soon. Theo's face fell, but he nodded. The walk to the airport was quiet, the space between them heavy with unspoken questions. Back at the terminal, the mood was different. Passengers from Flight 237 were bonded by survival, sharing stories and nervous laughs. Ezra and Theo sat near their gate, their knees brushing. Ezra's phone buzzed again, another X post. This time a thread analyzing their chemistry in the viral photo. He showed it to Theo, who smirked. They're writing fanfiction about us now. Ezra laughed, but it faded fast. Theo, what are we doing? Is this real? Theo's expression turned serious. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. Don't you? Before Ezra could answer, their flight was called. They boarded in silence. But this time, Theo took the seat next to him without asking. As the plane took off, Ezra's hand found Theo's again, a silent promise to figure it out together. Back in San Francisco, the city felt different, like it had shifted while they were gone. Ezra's apartment in the Castro was a mess of code printouts and empty coffee cups, a stark contrast to Theo's sleek condo in Palo Alto. They agreed to meet the next evening, a tentative step toward whatever this was. Ezra spent the day distracted, his coding sluggish, his mind on Theo's confession by the river. They met at a quiet beach near Ocean Beach, the same one from the image prompt, where the sunset painted the sky in hues of fire. Ezra arrived first, his navy jacket flapping in the wind. Theo showed up in a white sweater, his blonde curls catching the light. They stood close, the crash's aftershocks still lingering in their silence. I keep thinking about that text, Theo said, his voice barely above the waves. You could have died, and I'd never have known. Ezra's throat tightened. I didn't think you'd care. Theo turned, his blue eyes fierce. I cared, Ezra. I always cared. I just didn't know how to say it. The words broke something in Ezra. He stepped closer, their hands brushing. I'm saying it now, he whispered. I like you, Theo. More than I should. Theo's breath hitched, and then he was kissing Ezra, soft and urgent, the ocean's roar swallowing their fears. It was messy, real, everything they'd held back for years. When they pulled apart, Theo's smile was shaky but genuine. We're idiots, he said. Ezra laughed, resting his forehead against Theo's. Yeah, but we're here now. The weeks that followed were a blur of discovery. They went on dates awkward at first, then easy, like slipping into a rhythm they'd always known. Coffee shops in the Mission, late night drives along the coast, quiet moments coding side by side. Ezra learned Theo's quirks, how he hummed off key when nervous, how he loved spicy food but couldn't handle it. Theo learned Ezra's too, his habit of fidgeting with pens, his secret love for old jazz records. But the world wasn't as kind as their bubble. At a tech conference in San Jose, they ran into old Berkeley classmates, some of whom raised eyebrows at their closeness. Ezra felt the old defensiveness creep in, but Theo just slung an arm around him. Unapologetic. Let them stare, Theo said later, over tacos at a food truck. I'm done hiding. Ezra wanted to be that brave, but doubt lingered. His parents, conservative and distant, had never understood him, let alone accepted his sexuality. Theo's family was different, open, supportive, but Ezra couldn't shake the fear of judgment. At work, rumors spread, fueled by the viral X posts. Colleagues whispered, and Ezra's boss, a stern woman named Carla, called him into her office. Keep your personal life out of the headlines, she warned. This company doesn't need drama. Ezra nodded, but anger simmered. He wasn't ashamed of Theo, but the scrutiny stung. That night, he vented to Theo over beers at a bar in No Valley. I hate that we have to justify this, Ezra said, slamming his glass down. Theo's hand covered his, steadying him. We don't. Not to them. Just to each other. The tension wasn't just external. Ezra and Theo's old rivalry flared at times, their stubbornness clashing. During a joint project for a hackathon, they argued over code architecture until 2 a.m. Voices raised, tempers hot. Ezra stormed out, only to find Theo waiting outside his apartment the next morning, coffee in hand. I'm sorry, Theo said. I push you because you're brilliant, not because I want to win. Ezra sighed, letting him in. We're a mess, aren't we? Theo grinned. The best kind. They made up, their kisses fierce, their apologies whispered against skin. But the fight left a mark. Ezra wondered if their past would always haunt them, if love could outlast their sharp edges. By month's end, they faced a new challenge. Theo got an offer from a tech giant in New York, a dream job with a corner office and a fat salary. He told Ezra over dinner at a cozy Italian place in North Beach, his voice hesitant. It's a big move, Theo said. But I'd stay. For you. Ezra's heart sank. He wanted Theo to stay, but he saw the spark in Theo's eyes, the ambition that mirrored his own. You can't turn that down, Ezra said, forcing a smile. We'll figure it out. Theo reached for his hand. Long distance. Ezra nodded, but fear gnawed at him. Could they survive the miles, the time zones, the pull of their separate lives? Theo left for New York in the spring, his condo packed into boxes, his life uprooted. Ezra drove him to the airport, the silence between them heavy. At the gate, Theo kissed him, long and desperate. like he was memorizing the feel of Ezra's lips. "I'll call every day," Theo promised. Ezra nodded, his throat too tight for words. He watched Theo disappear into the crowd, feeling like he'd lost something vital. Long distance was brutal. Their schedules clashed: Ezra's late-night coding sessions versus Theo's early meetings. Video calls were their lifeline, but pixelated screens couldn't replace Theo's warmth. Ezra threw himself into work, but the loneliness crept in. He'd walk by their favorite coffee shop and feel a pang, remembering Theo's laugh over burnt espresso. Posts about them had died down, but the internet never forgot. A coworker sent Ezra a meme of their viral photo, captioned, "Crash buddies to lovers." He laughed it off, but it hurt, like their story was a joke to the world. He texted Theo about it, expecting a quip, but Theo called instead. "Ignore them," Theo said, his voice firm. "This is ours, not theirs." Ezra wanted to believe him, but doubt grew. Theo's texts became shorter, his calls less frequent. Ezra wondered if New York was pulling him away, if Theo was finding new people, new dreams. The thought made him sick. One night, Ezra scrolled through Theo's ex profile, a habit he hated himself for. Theo had posted a photo from a rooftop bar, Manhattan's skyline glittering behind him. He looked happy, surrounded by new colleagues, his smile bright. Ezra's chest tightened. Was he losing Theo? He called, but Theo didn't pick up. Hours later, a text: "Sorry. Crazy day. Talk tomorrow." Ezra stared at the screen, anger and fear mixing. He typed a reply, then deleted it. Instead, he booked a flight to New York. He needed to see Theo, to know if they were still real. New York was overwhelming, a concrete jungle that made Ezra feel small. He showed up at Theo's office in Midtown, a sleek tower of glass. Theo was in a meeting, but when he saw Ezra in the lobby, his face lit up. They hugged, and for a moment, it was like nothing had changed. They spent the weekend together, exploring the city. Central Park in bloom, street food in Brooklyn, a quiet night in Theo's tiny apartment. They talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. Theo admitted the job was intense, the pressure relentless. "I miss you," he said, his voice breaking. "Every day?" Ezra's anger melted. "Then why do you feel so far away?" Theo looked away, guilt in his eyes. "I'm trying to be enough for you. For this job. For everyone. But I'm screwing it up." Ezra pulled him close. "You're enough. Just don't shut me out." They made love that night, slow and deliberate, like they were rebuilding something fragile. But the visit wasn't all fixes. Ezra saw how Theo thrived in New York, how the city fit him. Back in San Francisco, Ezra felt the distance again, sharper now. Months passed, and the strain grew. Ezra's startup hit a rough patch, layoffs looming. He didn't tell Theo, not wanting to burden him. But Theo sensed it, pushing Ezra to open up during their calls. "We're a team," Theo said. "You don't have to do this alone." Ezra wanted to believe it, but pride held him back. He started pulling away, his texts curt, his calls short. Theo pushed back, sending long voicemails Ezra didn't answer. One night, Theo showed up at Ezra's apartment, unannounced, eyes blazing. "You can't just ghost me," Theo said, stepping inside. "What's going on?" Ezra broke, the dam bursting. He told Theo about the layoffs, his fears, his feeling of being left behind. Theo listened, then pulled him into a hug. "I'm not going anywhere," Theo said. "Not unless you tell me to." Ezra clung to him, tears falling. "I don't want you to." They spent the night talking, rebuilding. Theo extended his stay, working remotely from Ezra's apartment. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. They started planning visits, alternating coasts, refusing to let the distance win. A year after the crash, Ezra and Theo were still navigating their new normal. Long distance wasn't easy, but they made it work. Weekend flights, late-night calls, shared playlists to bridge the gap. Ezra's startup survived, and he landed a promotion. Theo thrived in New York, but he talked about moving back, maybe starting something new together. One evening, Theo surprised Ezra with a trip back to the San Francisco beach where they'd shared their first kiss. The sunset was just as vivid, the waves just as soothing. They sat on a blanket, a picnic spread before them, the driftwood with their stories tagline nearby. "I've been thinking," Theo said, his voice steady but nervous. "About us. About the future." Ezra's heart raced. "Yeah." Theo pulled out a small box, his hands shaking. Inside was a simple silver ring, engraved with their initials. "I don't care about the distance. Ezra, I want you. Always. Will you marry me?" Ezra's breath caught, tears blurring his vision. He thought of the crash, the text, the years of fighting and loving and learning. "Yes," he whispered, pulling Theo into a kiss that felt like a vow. Their wedding was small, on that same beach, with friends and family who'd seen them through it all. The viral X posts had faded, but their story lived on in the people who mattered. Ezra's parents didn't come, but Theo's family embraced him, filling the gap. As they exchanged vows, Ezra felt the weight of their journey. Every fight, every fear, every moment of love settle into something solid, something true. The reception was a blur of laughter and music, Theo's off-key humming making Ezra grin. They danced under string lights, the ocean their soundtrack. "You blind fool," Ezra teased, echoing his text. Theo laughed, pulling him close. "I see you now." Years later, they'd tell their story to anyone who asked. The crash, the text, the rivalry that became love. They started a tech nonprofit together, mentoring queer kids in San Francisco, giving them the support they'd once craved. The plane crash was a scar, but it was also a spark, the moment that forced them to be honest, to be brave. Ezra and Theo weren't perfect. They still argued, still pushed each other's buttons. But they'd learned to fight for each other, not against. And every time they walked by that beach, they'd pause, remembering the driftwood, the sunset, the moment they chose love over fear. Their story wasn't just about surviving a crash. It was about surviving themselves, their doubts, their world's judgment. It was about finding home in each other, no matter where life took them.